Thank you all very much. You know, I serve in Congress, and other than the military paradigm where, what time is it now? We'd already be done with 90% of our day, but in Congress, seeing a group of this size at this time of the morning just really doesn't happen very much, quite honestly. A little bit maybe in the gym or the locker room. You know, we're here to talk about some of the good stuff that the doctor talked about just previously, and of course he mentioned the Senate legislation and the fact that the House has already acted. But I will tell you, serving on the cyber subcommittee, how difficult it is to thread the needle, and what's really what we're trying to do between privacy and acknowledging what we know is happening right before our eyes every single day, every single minute, 365 days a year, and how slow government is to react because of all the things that we must consider. At the same time, we understand the gravity of the circumstance, not only for the United States government, but for regular businesses and individuals that the government is bound to protect. But even within that, there becomes one question begets another, and what is the role of the government? For instance, I'll just give you a couple. You know, the Dr. Osment, he recognized the Sony attack. And you think to yourself, well, you know, this is obvious. We must do something about this. But this is the federal government, and is this a state? Is this the state government's responsibility? Is it government's responsibility? Is it a crime? You know, I would say it's a crime. But if it is a crime, how do you prosecute that crime? Is that international courts, or are those state courts, or are those federal courts? How much money do you spend on that kind of stuff? I mean, it just goes on and on and on, and it is very difficult to look. We work things into the minutia. We just do because we have to. These are important issues, as every single one is, and there are the unintended consequences. I often think as we do legislation, we've created. People have said, I'm jumping around here, but we are a nation of laws. But recently we've become a nation of rules, right? It's not the lawmakers, it's not the legislature that's making the laws, it's the rule makers, it's the bureaucrats, it's the people in the agencies that are making the rules. And so we've got to be careful what we ask for, because these things have a way of just getting huge and getting larger and larger and creeping and more into our lives. And I think we're very aware of that and sensitive to that. But we recognize the threat, and so we feel compelled to do absolutely everything we can and to do something. And we have committee hearings, and this is technical for most of us. You know, I'm like most people, I carry around 2 cell phones. I've got 2 iPads, I've got multiple computers. If it doesn't recognize my password or my username, or I want to throw it, I don't have time. I want the thing to work. I've got work to do, and I don't include the work that I have to do. I don't include trying to fix the machine to do the work, right? That's somebody else's deal, and you can't find them. They're busy doing. You know what I mean? And we don't want what the federal government does to impose upon that, and so we're very concerned that it will. At the same time, we must do something. So that, you know, I can't go through all the numbers with you. I have a staff member here with me today who none of us do a good job at this without staff. But I was looking at some of the figures that she gave me here, and I just questioned her on them. And look, they do a good job, right? But it's since in 2012, cybercrime cost the U.S. companies on average $11.5 million. Up 26% from the previous year. That was 2012. And then identity theft, the most profitable form of cybercrime, cost the U.S. roughly $780 million per year, with U.S. banks losing between $305 million annually. And then this is the one that probably really piqued my interest. Each week, U.S. businesses experience an average of 79 attacks that cause business disruptions. Now, as a member of the committee, I get the classified briefings, and I will tell you none of those numbers were recognizable to me, because as I can't tell you the number because it's classified, but those numbers that were given to me are amplified by 10 to 100 to 1,000 fold, right, from the briefings that I get from the top agencies that monitor this stuff across the world and across the country. So that is the gravity of the circumstance. Now, as the doctor said, the Senate's working on a bill now. We've passed 3 recently in the House, and the big one, of course, is to allow folks to share information without the fear of reprisals from a litigious standpoint. But even listening to Dr. Osmond go through it, he said, if you have an issue, you can call me, and I've got some good lawyers that can talk to your lawyer. That's already too difficult, right? To me, that's already too difficult, and that's an imposition upon businesses that are trying to make money, trying to make a living, trying to pay their employees, and again cover the burden of servicing their customers to have to deal with that. And we as members of Congress must recognize that difficulty and try and make it easier. Try and encourage you, which is what we're trying to do, to collaborate not only with each other, but with the federal government, because the federal government, look, of all the bad news you're going to hear today, and I think it's almost all bad news, quite honestly. I really do. But of all the bad news you're going to hear today, you can take some solace in this. And I believe it's true because I've asked the question. We have countries, you got Iran, you got China, you got Russia, you got anybody, in a basement that has malicious thoughts in mind, able to do the worst things imaginable to individuals and countries around the globe. But what we have in the United States is the best of the people stopping it, and quite honestly, the best, as I understand it, on the offensive side of the equation as well. And you can take some solace in that. Very little if you're the company or the person that is hacked and your personal information is taken. But with that, we're going to continue to try and thread the needle. We have encouraged your collaboration with one another, but most importantly with the federal government, because that is the repository of this great resource. And you must recognize that and become comfortable with sharing certain portions of the information. Now, I think it also is incumbent upon the federal government to set some guidelines and to be fair actors. I can think of a couple recent occurrences, and I'm not going to name some names, the large retailers that have been hacked, and then personal information has been sent around or used or who knows what, and there's been penalties from the government for their actions or inactions. And at the same time you have, or shortly thereafter, you get news of this OPM breach, which reaches over 20 million people in the government, and not just their information, especially when you talk about if you've ever filled out what's called the SF-86. It is the form you fill out for your top secret or your secret security clearance, right? And it lists everything about you and then some more. And they like to ask you who your friends are, and then they like to ask you who your enemies are on the form, right? And they're probably not going to go talk to your friends, right? Really go talk to your enemies and to find out about you. But all that's listed on there, and all their information is listed on there. And all that was taken in this OPM breach. And you wonder, to me, as a member of Congress and as a person who's owned a business and watched these businesses prosecuted and persecuted, like who's prosecuting and persecuting OPM for their failure, right? Where is the level playing field? So government needs to do a good job. I'm watching, okay, so this gets my attention, by the way. I saw this. The doctor was impervious to it. It was amazing. Right? I think it was flashing red, and as members of Congress, we have that thing right in front of us, and you got to shut up, man. So good for him, or not. We've got to do a better job at recognizing that. We also have had a bill to engage the Department of Homeland Security. This is the new frontier. The good news for America, at least in conventional warfare terms, is that we are far and above any other country on the planet. It doesn't matter the size of their military. Our mission has been for many, many years to fight outnumbered, out-equipped, out everything, and win. And so that's how we present ourselves. That's how we look at our stake from a defense standpoint, from an aggressive standpoint, quite honestly. But the problem with cyber is that we are literally at this moment at parity. Or maybe it's better to think of it this way. These other countries, rogue nations and individuals, are at parity with the United States. If you have a computer and some know-how, you can do many, many things, and it is difficult. And that is the gravity of the situation. And it seems like the place to fight that, to combat that, is in Homeland Security to a certain extent. So we've introduced legislation, we've passed legislation in the House to do that. And then we've also just recently passed legislation, again in the House, to encourage and to enable training for local and state governments in cybersecurity, because I will tell you this, All of us somehow think it's not going to happen to us. And listen, I'm not asking for any problems. I take care of some of the safeguards that the doctor talked about that we all must. You don't let your card laying around. You carry your card in one of those sheets. If you know what I'm talking, I don't have mine with me, but if you have one of the chips in your card or even the magnetic strip and you walk close to somebody that's hacking, they can take it unless you have that foil sheet around your credit card, right? So there's little things that we all do, but none of us think it's going to happen to us. Okay, I'm not impervious to it, so I'll try and wrap it up here and see if there are any questions. But this is expensive to keep up with all the different and it changes by the moment. It changes by the capabilities change and the tactics and the strategies of criminal activities and governments change by the moment. And so we all must be vigilant, and that's why we've offered this legislation. We're hoping that there's some way to get together with the Senate on this and move it forward so that there are training opportunities and knowledge opportunities for our governments as well. You all end up paying for this. And to protect yourselves, and we need to be a part of that, right? We need to be a part of offering what the federal government has to help you protect your networks and your information more closely. And I will tell you this too: all of us, I think that, well, I don't have anything that somebody's going to want. Like personally, and even in my business, I have a business, and I can't imagine anybody wanting to have what I had in my business. But you got to remember that you're competing out there, and there are people that are trying to enter the marketplace. Your contract information, your bid information, your pricing information, not just your information on your product, is important to them. And what's even worse than that is they might not want your information at all, but they might want to use you as the doorway to somebody's information that they do want. And if you're competing, and if you're bidding, or if you're submitting proposals or collaborating with somebody on some project that somebody else is interested in, their system might be tight, but yours might not be. And yours is the entryway to somebody else's, and you're in the middle of this whole thing. And that's how you've got to, it's an unfortunate thing that every single day you have to wake up now, and where you didn't have to wonder whether your house was burgled because your front door is still locked and none of the windows are broken, and you go about your day feeling relatively secure. Unfortunately, with these devices we carry and the way we're interconnected, that is not the case in every other facet of our life. We must be vigilant every single day, actively looking to educate ourselves and to protect ourselves, because they are after us. They are after us. So now, let me just conclude with this. The federal government, we are your representatives, and we're trying desperately to do a good job. This is technical, it's time-consuming, it's tedious, it's kind of dry and boring, right? We need your input on what works, and while we do that, how not to overreach. We're trying to reach as far as we can, but not overreach so that we're causing problems for our businesses, for individuals. We don't want to do that. It just sometimes happens, but we need your collaboration. We need your input every single day. Members need you to talk to them. If they're not on the cybersecurity subcommittee, they need to talk to you. You need to talk to them. They need to hear from you so that they understand how important this is and what you can add to the equation. You're on the front lines. All of us are on the front lines. Literally all of us are, but you have a specific bent to the thing. You've got specific concerns, remedies, et cetera. We don't know them, right? As a member of Congress, I can tell you I live my life in about 15-minute increments, anywhere from nuclear war to brain surgery to weeds on the township road, right? And every 15 minutes it's something else. So you got to get in, you got to make it impactful, and make sure we got it, and then keep coming back, and then keep coming back, right? So is there time for questions, or you do not want questions? One or two, any questions? Yes, sir.
Congressman Nathan Rosenberg from Insigniam. First of all, thank you for your service twice. That's really great. Sir, I'd like you to talk about the other side of it. So the Chinese hacked McDonnell Douglas files years ago, and then built a world-class fighter.
Right.
Air Force Academy, where I went, now has a minor in cyber warfare. So what's the defense side of all of this?
Well, and thank you for your service. The defense side is there are new curriculums coming out of DOD and out of the government in general related to this. And one of the problems, quite honestly, is that we know we want to do it. We have these curriculums, but we don't want to talk about it too much because we don't want to let the enemy, whether it's some individual in their basement hacking the federal government or anybody else, or whether it's China-sponsored China's been hacking our DoD for about 15 years straight. We can acknowledge about 15 years they've been doing it. We don't want to tell them what we're doing, and we don't want to advertise that. But it is the new frontier of warfare. When we think of cyber crimes, I think of, well, maybe you just you screwed up my machine, so I can't use it. But we don't think to the next step, where literally they can type something in this end, and on that end something is physically, literally being destroyed. And you can see I've got the photographs, and the information is out there where power plants literally were destroyed. If you look at the Stuxnet virus, it didn't just shut down the operation in Iran's centrifuges, it oversped them, right? They went too fast until they were physically destroyed. And when you think about the possibilities of what that means to our electricity grid, to the water, to our infrastructure in general, I mean, the implications are just boundless. And so we are in the new frontier. We're probably not where we want to be, but again, the only solace that we have, I think, or the solace that we have as Americans is as far as advanced as countries like China, Russia, and Iran are, and they are advanced. We are well ahead of them. But we can't. But this is going to be a new expense, and it's going to be something that we as Americans are going to struggle with because we like the openness. Our society, one of the great things about our society is also our Achilles heel, right? The frankness, the openness. We all know these things. But in this paradigm, we're fighting a war, and part of fighting a war is the art of surprise and stealth and disinformation. And so we're going to operate in those realms simultaneously, I think, and we need to be more robust. This is the new frontier of warfare, and there's a lot of people that think that this is the only place warfare will be fought. States won't go to war on the ground as they used to or in the air. They'll go to war over the airwaves and through networks. And that the problem with that is that the parity between rogue states, third world countries, and a country like the United States are literally at parity. Yes? No. Any other question? In the back. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I'm Paul Stern, member CED. I'm interested in your thoughts on the allocation of adequate funds in our federal budget, both at DARPA and at other divisions of the Defense Department with regard to cyber technology. We are cutting back because of this notion that there's some sort of a fiscal challenge that we're in, and that we're supposed to shrink the government. And I'm wondering what you think the impact is on our offense and defense capabilities.
Well, there's no doubt about it that the funding is not where it needs to be for those systems, and the priority. I'm not sure that the priority is not there, but every one of us has to make choices and prioritize funding and assets and our goals in that regard. Sequestration has been very difficult for DoD in general, and DARPA is not immune from that. It is a blunt instrument that nobody expected to happen, but unfortunately, it is the only thing that's out there right now to drive down the cost of government, and constituencies demand the cost be driven down. We have to recognize, and the Congress does, and we've been creating some strange things in Congress to make sure that you have this reserve OCO account that we created recently to try and plus up DoD, including programs like the ones you're talking about. But it's not effective in the long run. It can't be depended on. It can't be relied upon. You can't plan as you need to appropriately. And folks, what it comes down to is as members of Congress and members of the citizenry, all of us as Americans have to decide our priorities and be willing to make some very difficult choices. From my standpoint, defending the nation is listed in the Constitution, and it is a requirement of our federal government. It just doesn't go. It's as simple as that. But it's going to mean that something else is going to have to give. We don't have all the money that we want and need to do everything we want to, so we're going to have to prioritize. And if this is going to be a priority for us, and it should be, it must be, if we want to maintain our position on the global stage from a defense and from an offensive capability, something else is going to have to give, and we have to make very difficult choices. And quite honestly, we have not been willing to as a Congress. And there's some reasons for that. The other thing is the administration has said absolutely not. The only thing the administration has really been willing to take a shot at has been the Department of Defense and some of the non-defense discretionary spending. What's driving our debt and our deficit is the autopilot spending, the Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, interest on the debt. That has to be part of the equation, and we need to rebalance what we're doing. And we can't use the administration's unwillingness to deal with some of those issues as a reason for Congress not to deal with them as well. Somebody must push, and we all have an obligation and a duty to do that. And it's going to be too darn late when the electricity grid goes down in the Northeast or somewhere else for a matter of days, weeks, or months, and the mayhem that would ensue. And then we all look at each other and say, well, how did this happen? We cannot be as irresponsible as to wait for that to occur. And that's literally the potential of something. They think about the consequences. That's where it could be. So it's a great question, and that's why your representative and all of your representatives need to hear from you if you think this is an important issue, and I hope you do, because it is the new frontier of warfare, and this is nothing new for America. There's a lot of people around the globe that dislike us and would like to do harm to us, and this gives them entree into every one of our lives at a very intimate level, and that's just where it is. So, yeah, it needs the resources. Thank you very much. All right, I hope it's a good day for you. I appreciate what you do for your country.